Hello and welcome. Tonight's story explores how we end relationships, chapters, and periods of our lives. It asks, what if we could learn to close doors gracefully instead of leaving them open forever? May this story gently teach you the art of ending things as you drift off to sleep. At the edge of a forest where autumn seemed to last forever, where leaves fell perpetually in shades of gold and crimson, there existed a garden unlike any other. It was a garden devoted entirely to endings, not to death exactly, but to closure, to the proper completion of things, to the art of finishing well. The garden was tended by a woman named Helena, who was ageless in the way that people who have learned to accept impermanence often are. Her hair was the silver gray of birch bark. Her hands were soil-stained and strong. She wore simple clothes and moved through the garden with the unhurried grace of someone who understood that all things have their season. The garden was divided into sections, each one devoted to a different type of ending. There was a section for relationships that needed to close, a section for careers that had run their course, a section for identities that no longer fit, a section for dreams that needed to be released, a section for grief that needed to be completed. And in each section, Helena planted what she called ending ceremonies, rituals and practices that helped people close doors properly, instead of leaving them perpetually ajar, draining energy, creating haunting. One afternoon, as the perpetual autumn leaves drifted down, a woman arrived at the garden gate. Her name was Diana, and she was 56 years old. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness, the exhaustion of carrying too many unfinished things. Helena looked up from the bed she was tending and knew immediately what Diana needed. She could always tell. Some people came to the garden carrying one or two incomplete endings. Diana was carrying dozens. They hung from her like chains, weighing her down, draining her life force. "I can't let go," Diana said without preamble. "I've tried therapy, books, meditation. Nothing works. I'm still holding on to everything. Every relationship that ended, every job I left, every version of myself I used to be. It's all still there, unfinished, unresolved, haunting me." Helena set down her trowel and brushed soil from her hands. "Show me." She led Diana to a section of the garden where a large mirror stood among the plants. It was framed in dark wood and reflected not just Diana's physical appearance, but something more, the invisible weight she carried. In the mirror, Diana saw herself surrounded by ghostly figures and objects. Her ex-husband from 20 years ago, the friend she'd had a falling out with, the mother she'd lost 10 years prior, the career as a dancer she'd abandoned at 30, the apartment she'd loved, the younger version of herself she'd never quite said goodbye to. They surrounded her, all these unfinished endings, demanding attention, siphoning energy, keeping her tethered to the past. "Oh God," Diana whispered, "there are so many." "Yes," Helena said gently. "You've been keeping every door open, haven't you? Thinking that maybe someday you'd go back through. Maybe you'd reconcile with your ex-husband. Maybe you'd reconnect with that friend. maybe you'd become a dancer again. Maybe you'd get closure with your mother. So you never actually closed any of the doors. You just left them ajar, and they've been draining you ever since. Diana sank onto a nearby bench, overwhelmed. I thought keeping them open was being hopeful, being open to possibility. There's a difference between being open to new things and refusing to complete old things, Helena said. Keeping every door from your past ajar doesn't create possibility. It creates exhaustion. You can't move forward freely when you're still energetically attached to everything behind you. How do I close the doors? Diana asked. One at a time, Helena said, with intention, with ceremony, with respect for what was and acceptance of what is. Come, let me teach you. Helena led Diana to a section of the garden where small trees grew in neat rows. Each tree had a plaque at its base with a name and a date. These are completion trees, Helena explained. Each one represents an ending that someone has properly closed. When you're ready to end something, a relationship, a chapter, an identity, you plant a tree. You speak to it. You thank what was. You acknowledge what it gave you and what it cost you. You say a proper goodbye, and then you leave it here in the garden properly completed. She handed Diana a small sapling in a pot. What ending feels most urgent for you? Helena asked. What's taking up the most energy? Diana thought. There were so many, but one rose to the surface immediately. My marriage, it ended 20 years ago. We divorced, he remarried, moved on, but I never properly ended it. I just sort of drifted away from it, bitter and hurt and confused. I've been carrying the unfinished grief of it ever since. Then that's where we start, Helena said. She led Diana to an empty spot in the garden. Together they dug a hole. The physical labor was intentional. Helena believed endings required embodied action, not just mental acknowledgement. When the hole was ready, Diana knelt beside it, holding the sapling. Now, Helena instructed, speak to the marriage. Say what needs to be said. Don't censor. Don't make it neat or kind or appropriate. Just say what's true. Diana's hands trembled, but she spoke. I loved you. I loved us. I thought we'd be together forever. And when you left, when we fell apart, it broke something in me. I was angry for years, hurt for years, and then just hollow, numb. I told everyone I was over it, but I wasn't. I never properly mourned, never properly said goodbye. Tears streamed down her face now. Thank you for the good years, for the moments of joy, for teaching me what love could feel like, even if it didn't last. And I'm sorry for my part in the failure, for the ways I hurt you, for the ways I wasn't present or kind or patient. She paused, breathing hard, and now I'm saying goodbye, really saying it for the first time in 20 years. Goodbye to the marriage, goodbye to the version of myself who was your wife. Goodbye to the future we never had. Goodbye. Helena placed a hand on Diana's shoulder. Now plant the tree. Diana lowered the sapling into the hole. Together they filled it with earth, patting it down firmly. And as they did, Diana felt something shift. The ghostly image of her ex-husband that had been visible in the mirror, it faded. Not disappeared entirely, but no longer draining her. Just a memory now. A completed chapter. "How do you feel?" Helena asked. "Lighter," Diana said, surprised. "Sad, but clean, like I finally finished something I'd been carrying half done for 2 decades. That's what proper endings feel like," Helena said. "They don't erase the past. They don't make the pain disappear, but they complete it. They allow it to become memory instead of haunting, story instead of wound." Over the following weeks, Diana returned to the garden again and again. Each visit, she planted another ending. She planted a tree for the friendship that had ended badly, speaking her truth about the hurt and also her part in the conflict, then releasing it with grace. She planted a tree for her mother, 10 years dead, but never properly mourned because Diana had been too busy being strong, too busy handling logistics, too busy to actually grieve. She planted a tree for her dancing career, the identity she'd carried for 30 years and then abandoned abruptly, never acknowledging the loss, never honoring what it had meant to her. She planted a tree for the younger version of herself, the 25-year-old Diana who had been so full of dreams and certainty that Diana was gone, had been gone for decades. But 56-year-old Diana had never properly acknowledged the loss, never thanked her younger self, never released her. Each planting was different, each ceremony unique. Sometimes Diana wept, sometimes she laughed, sometimes she sat in silence, just feeling the weight lift as she finally, properly completed what had been left unfinished. Helena guided her through each one, teaching her the art of ending well. "Every ending has 3 parts, Helena explained. Acknowledgement, gratitude, and release. First, you acknowledge what was. You don't revise it or make it better or worse than it was. You just see it clearly. This relationship existed. This chapter happened. This version of me was real. Second, you express gratitude. Not because everything was good, some endings are genuinely terrible, but because everything taught you something. Everything shaped you. Even the painful endings gave you something, even if it was just the knowledge of what you don't want. Third, you release it. You consciously let it go. You close the door, not with bitterness or regret, but with intention. You say, this was. Now it's complete. I'm free to move forward. Diana absorbed these teachings, and slowly the weight she'd been carrying for decades began to lift. But there was one ending Diana couldn't complete. One door she couldn't close. Her daughter, Emma, had moved across the country 5 years ago. They'd had a terrible fight before she left about Emma's choices, her partner, her career path. Harsh words had been spoken, and then Emma had left, and they'd barely spoken since. Diana wanted to plant a tree for this relationship, wanted to complete it, close the door, move on. But every time she tried, something stopped her. Helena watched her struggle with this for weeks. Finally, she said, "Not all endings are meant to be completed yet." Diana looked up, frustrated. "What do you mean?" "You said we need to close doors. Let go, complete things. We do, Helena agreed. But there's a difference between an ending that's final and an ending that's still in process. Your marriage ended. Your friend moved away. Your mother died. Your dancing career concluded. Those were final. They couldn't be reopened even if you wanted to. But Emma, Helena continued, she's still alive. The door isn't closed on your relationship. It's just difficult right now. And if you plant a tree for it, if you treat it as completed, you're closing a door that might not need to be closed. You're ending something that might be meant to transform instead. Diana sat with this. So what do I do? You plant a different kind of tree, Helena said. Not an ending tree, a transformation tree. You acknowledge that this chapter of your relationship with Emma has ended. The chapter where you were the mother guiding her choices. But you leave space for a new chapter, where you're two adults figuring out how to relate differently. She led Diana to a different section of the garden. Here, the trees were different, grafted, hybrid, constantly growing and changing, rather than standing as monuments. This is the transformation garden, Helena said, for relationships and identities that aren't ending but evolving. You can plant here without closing the door. You can complete one version while leaving space for another. Diana planted a transformation tree for her relationship with Emma. She spoke to it honestly, acknowledging the pain, the conflict, the current distance, expressing gratitude for the years of motherhood, the joy Emma had brought her. And then, instead of releasing entirely, she spoke a different kind of completion. I'm ending my need to control you. I'm ending my expectation that you'll live according to my vision. I'm ending the version of our relationship where I'm the authority and you're the child. But I'm not ending my love. I'm not ending my hope that we'll find a new way to relate. I'm just transforming. Letting go of what was so something new can grow. As she patted the earth around this tree, Diana felt different than she had with the other plantings. Not the complete release, but a shifting, a softening, a recognition that not all chapters end, some just turn the page. As Diana's work in the garden continued, Helena taught her the broader principles of ending well. Most people, Helena explained one afternoon as they worked side by side, never learn how to end things properly. They either avoid endings entirely, leaving relationships, jobs, identities to drift off ambiguously, or they end things destructively, burning bridges, creating more damage than closure. She pruned a bush as she spoke, demonstrating the principle physically. Good endings require intention. They require acknowledging that something is complete. They require grieving what's being lost while also honoring what was gained. They require saying goodbye without bitterness. Why is that so hard? Diana asked. Because endings feel like failure, Helena said. We're taught that good things last forever. That if a relationship ends, someone failed. That if we change careers, we wasted time. That if we outgrow a dream, we weren't committed enough. So we avoid acknowledging endings because we don't want to admit failure. But the truth is, all things end. Relationships end, either through death or change. Careers end when we retire or shift direction. Identities end as we grow and evolve. Chapters close. The only question is, will we end them with grace, or will we let them drag on, incomplete and draining? Diana pruned her own branch, feeling the metaphor. So ending isn't failure, it's just completion. Exactly, Helena said. A book that goes on forever isn't better than one that ends. It's just unreadable. Life is chapters, some long, some short, and each chapter needs to end properly for the next one to begin clearly. After 3 months of work in the garden, Diana had planted trees for all her major incomplete endings. The ghostly figures and objects that had surrounded her in the mirror were mostly gone. She felt lighter, freer, more present in her actual life instead of perpetually tethered to her past. On her last day in the garden, Helena led her to one final empty spot. "There's one more tree to plant," Helena said. Diana was confused. "I think I've completed everything." "Not everything," Helena said gently. "You need to plant a tree for your time here, for this chapter of healing and completion. Even the work of ending needs to be ended properly." Diana hadn't thought of this, but Helena was right. This time in the garden had been its own chapter, its own season, and it was time to complete it, to close this door too, so she could move forward. Together, they planted the final tree. Diana spoke her gratitude for the garden, for Helena's teaching, for the space to properly grieve and complete and release. She acknowledged what she'd learned, and then she said goodbye to this chapter too. As she patted the earth around the final tree, Diana felt the completion of the completion, the full circle. "What now?" she asked Helena. "Now you live," Helena said simply. "Now you move through your life with the energy you've reclaimed. Now you're free to be present in your actual life instead of perpetually processing your past. And when new things end, because they will, because all things do, you'll know how to complete them properly. You'll know how to close doors with grace." Diana hugged Helena, thanking her one last time. Then she walked out of the garden gate, feeling lighter than she had in decades, ready for whatever came next, unencumbered by incomplete pasts. Free. Helena watched Diana leave, then returned to her work. There were always more plants to tend, more endings to facilitate, more people who would arrive at the garden gate carrying incomplete closures. She didn't mind. This was her life's work, teaching people the art that modern culture had forgotten, how to end things well. Because everywhere around her, Helena saw the damage of incomplete endings. People carrying ex-partners they'd never properly released. Jobs they'd left years ago but never fully departed. Versions of themselves they'd outgrown but never acknowledged. Dreams they'd abandoned but never grieved. All these incomplete endings created exhaustion, confusion, inability to be fully present in the now. They were like computer programs running in the background, draining resources, slowing everything down. But it didn't have to be this way. Endings could be completed. Doors could be closed with grace. Chapters could finish properly, making space for new ones to begin. That evening, as the perpetual autumn light faded to dusk, Helena walked through the transformation garden, checking on the trees there. These were her favorites, the endings that weren't really endings but metamorphoses, the relationships that evolved rather than ended, the identities that transformed rather than concluded. She touched the tree Diana had planted for her relationship with Emma. It was thriving, putting out new growth already. Helena smiled. She had a feeling that relationship would find its new form, that the transformation would complete successfully. But even if it didn't, even if that door eventually closed entirely, Diana now knew how to handle it. She knew how to plant the tree, say the words, complete the ending, move forward. That was all anyone needed, the knowledge that endings were natural, that they could be done with grace, that they didn't have to haunt forever. Helena returned to her cottage at the edge of the garden as night fell. Tomorrow, more people would arrive at the gate. More incomplete endings would need tending. More trees would need planting. And Helena would be there, as she always was, teaching the art of completion, helping people close their doors with dignity and grace. Because all things end. The only question is how we choose to let them go. You, too, carry incomplete endings. Relationships that drifted off without closure. Jobs you left without proper goodbye. Dreams you abandoned without acknowledgement. Versions of yourself you outgrew, but never properly released. They hang on you, these incomplete endings. They drain your energy. They keep you tethered to the past. They prevent you from being fully present in your actual life. But you can complete them, not today, not all at once, but gradually, intentionally, with grace. Think about one ending you've never properly completed. One door you've left ajar for years, telling yourself maybe someday you'll go back through it. One relationship, job, dream, identity, chapter that needs completion. You don't have to do anything tonight. Just acknowledge it. Recognize that it's incomplete. Notice how much energy it's taking to keep that door propped open. And tomorrow, perhaps you can begin your own ceremony of completion, your own ritual of ending well. It might be a letter you write but don't send, a conversation you have with yourself in the mirror, a symbolic gesture burning something, burying something, releasing something. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It just has to be intentional. Acknowledgement, gratitude, release. This was, I learned from it. Now it's complete. I'm free to move forward. All things end. Your day is ending now as you drift towards sleep. This video is ending. These stories are ending. And that's not sad or wrong. It's natural. It's necessary. Because endings done properly create space. They free up energy. They allow new chapters to begin. So as you drift toward sleep tonight, practice a small ending. Let this day complete. Don't carry it into tomorrow. Acknowledge what it held, good and bad. Express gratitude for the lessons, even the difficult ones, and then release it. Let it be complete. Tomorrow will be new, fresh, unburdened by today's incompletions. But tonight, End this day well. Close this door with grace, and rest in the peaceful space that completion creates. Sleep well, dear one. Let this day end properly. Let these stories end. Let yourself drift into sleep, which is itself a perfect ending and a perfect beginning. All is complete. All is well. All is exactly as it should be. Rest now. The garden is tended. The trees are planted. The doors are closed. You are free. Sleep